Okay. So, welcome everybody. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this very first NoBeC Talk 2023. I'm Cornelia Walter. I just joined the Center for Social Norms and Behavioral Dynamics. And today we have an exciting agenda with starting Jonas Schöne from the Harvard Business School, University of Oxford, who is going to briefly talk to us, but then we have a brief video from him. And then we have Erte Xiao from Monash University. This whole session will be moderated by Eugen Diemand. And we then introduce a new format of 15 minutes backstage, where you have the opportunity for a more informal exchange with all the questions you never dared to ask to Erte. And we move on. All of this is taking place as part of the NoBeC Norms and Behavioral Change Talks, which is hosted by the Center for Social Norms and Behavioral Dynamics at UPenn. If you are interested, please feel free to consult our website. And if you have questions, ideas, or suggestions, feel free to get in touch anytime. And we move on. This, just as a sneak peek for 2023, is the interesting line of speakers that we have in store for you. So keep this page on your radar and log in and book your slot as soon as you can. Next. Few ground rules: please be muted, keep your camera on, use the chat, and if you for any chance have to get earlier off, please check the full recording on our YouTube website. Thank you. And for Jonas, do you want to say anything before we play your video?
Yeah, sure. I will introduce myself again in the video, but I'm finally a PhD student, supervised by Brian Parkinson and Amit Goldenberg from the University of Oxford and Harvard Business School, respectively. And I just wanted to quickly say thank you for this really cool format at NoBeC to give some space for the early career researchers. And I'm really excited for you to see my work and maybe ask some questions.
Thank you.
I think it's muted.
Thank you for the opportunity to present our recent Nature Human Behavior paper during the Norms and Behavioral Change Talks. My name is Jonas Schöne, and I'm in the final year of my PhD, supervised by Brian Parkinson from the University of Oxford and Amit Goldenberg from the Harvard Business School. Today we will talk about how acrophily, in addition to homophily, is a driver of political segregation. The extreme levels of political segregation in the United States today present a major social challenge. Political segregation reduces the interaction between group members and therefore contributing to polarization and intergroup hostility. Previous work has focused mainly on one key driver of segregation, namely political homophily, defined as the tendency to affiliate with others with similar political views. Political homophily results in the formation of echo chambers of like-minded people who rarely interact across political lines. In this article, we propose that in addition to political homophily, people's tie selection decisions are also driven by political acrophily, which we define as the tendency to prefer and affiliate with others who present a more extreme political view in the direction of one's political leaning. To illustrate these ideas, imagine there is a current political debate on opinions usually ranging from extremely conservative to extremely liberal. Let's say there are 10 responses in equal distance to each other. One of those is yours. Who would you choose to listen to according to the different ideas? When applying homophily, the chooser elects to keep others whose responses are closer, regardless of whether they're more or less extreme in intensity. If we apply a mix between homophily and acrophily, the chooser has a preference for high outrage responses, but still tries to find those who are more close to himself. When applying only acrophily, the chooser keeps only other users who are expressing higher outrage than himself. Across 4 studies, using 1,235 participants, we tested which of these strategies is applied when people have to actually make a selection decision, using the following task. In study 1 to 3, we presented participants a picture of police brutality against Black demonstrators. Participants were first asked to provide a text response to the picture. In study 4, we presented a keyword regarding a commonly discussed US policy to offer stimuli that were not picture-based. After providing this response, we asked them to rate their negative emotions from a scale from 1, no emotions, to 9, a lot of emotions. After this, participants viewed 6 peer responses to the same picture. Each response included a name, a rating, and a text response, and choose 3 peers they do not wish to see in the subsequent trials. The peers whom participants choose to keep stay on for the next trial, and participants are able to see their responses to the following image. To estimate the difference between participants' actual choice and what would have been a morpholess choice, we created a coefficient. This coefficient was calculated as the difference score between the most amorphous combination of potential peers and the combination that the participants actually choose. The higher this coefficient, the stronger a participant's tendency to acrophilize. We found that both political groups had a tendency to acrophilize. Liberals also showed an increase over time. While our first test of acrophily was able to show a difference in tie selection relative to homophily, we could not compare the degree of acrophily seen by participants to other strategies. Our second test of acrophily was designed to address this limitation by comparing participants' tie selection choices with what they would have chosen if they used a different tie selection strategy. A no-choice strategy, homophily, without any acrophily, and 2 complete acrophily strategies, one towards more emotional ratings and one towards less emotional ratings. The 0 line represents the average participants' kept rating. Each red dot represents the average beta coefficient for the simulations and its distribution. Participants' average kept rating are located between a pure homophily tie selection strategy and a pure acrophily strategy, higher for liberals and lower for conservatives. The goal of study 3 was to replicate findings of study 2 and further test potential mechanisms driving acrophily. We hypothesized that participants were selecting ties who are more extreme because they evaluated these extreme responses as more prototypical of their in-group. We found that participants rated the strongest response as their most representative of their in-group, as indicated by the green bars. In conclusion, we found strong evidence that participants' tie selection is a mix of homophily and acrophily. Our findings have important implications for understanding political segregation. People gradually drift apart in their political affiliation over time due to the selection process. First, people select others who are more extreme, which shifts the averages of a group into the more extreme ends. The next people will then have more extreme people to choose from, which further perpetuates this cycle. If you have any question, please feel free to reach out. The full text of the paper is available using this QR code. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jonas. And this leads us straight into the talk of Dr. Erte Xiao. No intention to profit, no repugnance. Over to you, Erte.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, looking good.
Thanks. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks for this great opportunity to present this paper. This is actually something that I just started recently, and is kind of new on my research agenda. We are still exploring, trying to understand, and many questions probably couldn't still be answered. If you have any suggestions, comments, please feel free to ask questions and so on, and we'd appreciate that. So this is a joint work with two of my students, Ben Brodak and Nina Schöne. Ben is actually just got a job, join Max Planck next year in Germany, and Nina will be on the job market next year. Both of them are great. If you're interested in hiring, please look at them. Okay, so all right, so let me start with the motivation. The public attitude towards the market is very important in terms of the well-function of market. Certain transactions, when they were perceived as repugnant, often face significant constraints and are even legally banned. So it's important to understand what drives and what shapes people's attitude towards those transactions. There's some research on repugnance, and probably most of you know of the work by Al Roth on organ donation. In those literature, very often researchers focus on the potential harm of profiting activities imposed on others. For example, when you're considering whether to monetize organ donations, we think it is repugnant, probably because we think that's going to exploit people in has disadvantages, also impose risk on sellers and buyers. So basically, we try to understand the repugnance by looking at the potential harms imposed on others. However, to the best of our knowledge, it's actually never clear whether harm is a necessary condition for repugnance. And in this paper, we draw attention to certain transactions that involve profiting from the misfortune of others, however, does not cause any misfortune. We're going to test the hypothesis that this kind of transactions can be perceived as distasteful, even though it does not really cause any harm on others. So to give you some examples, one of the example is life settlement or viatical settlement. In this case, an investor can purchase the life insurance policy from someone who usually those terminally ill person for lump sum. And then the investor will pay the premium and become the beneficiary of the policy. So in this case, as you can see, the investor profits more when the insured individual live a shorter life. Now, you may already find this being distasteful, but you may actually not aware that you probably yourself are engaged in such kind of profiting activities. So this is an article on Forbes where the author wrote during the pandemic, your pension may be gambling on human life, profiting from COVID death. Whether you know it or not, your pension gambling on the highly speculative life settlement funds, which profit when people die prematurely from COVID. And he also mentioned that life settlement funds are controversial for a host of obvious and not so obvious reasons. So in this case, when you invest in this fund, what this means is that the sooner people die and the better your pension is concerned. As you can imagine, during the pandemic, this fund actually made quite a lot of profit from COVID death. Okay, so another example also has been discussed a lot is this prediction market on terrorism. prediction market in general are those forums for trading contracts that yield payments based on the outcome of uncertain events. Many economists believe that this market can be used to improve the accuracy of forecast. So the prices can be the signal of the likelihood some event could happen. And there are also economists argue that we could use this idea to collect information about terrorists and improve the accuracy of terrorist attack prediction. So in this case, the market participants can trade stocks in predicting how likely some terrorist attacks could happen. And when this happens, the traders can profit. So again, in this case, as you can see, when terrorists happen, something bad happen, traders profit. However, of course, the traders has no way to really cause the attack. Now, this idea, even though economists think is kind of efficient, using the idea of market, improve the efficiency of the profit, the information collection but the market was never being able to being launched. In fact, it's got a lot of there's lots of controversial surrounding this idea. There were once in 2003, the Defense Department in US tried to launch this research project called the Policy Analysis Market. But it was quickly denounced by the politicians, and they argue this is just wrong, morally distasteful, and it might even create incentive to commit acts of the terrorism. Of course, there's a lot of discussion why this is a bad idea. Or what we want to highlight in this paper is that this feature where people profit from somebody's harm or some victims can be viewed as repugnant and distasteful. Just give you another example, might be more, you might find more familiar to your daily life, is this purchasing foreclosed house when house owners are unable to pay off their debts. The bank take off the houses and then sell it on the market at a much cheaper price. So again, here, as you can see, the buyer of those houses basically benefit from the owner's misfortune, the owner's failure to pay the mortgage and the loss of the house. Some people also find it being distasteful and talk about whether it is wrong to buy foreclosed home. Just give you a last example is from a movie industry. Some movies are filmed based on some true story or tragedy stories. For example, this is a new film in Australia just coming out last year called Stranger. The story is based on a murdered Australian child. When this film just come out, is again become very controversial and get a lot of criticism, especially the families of the victim, the children, wrote an article talking about how morally wrong this film is. And I want to highlight a quote from their family, which I think probably speak for some reasons why people find this idea being distasteful. Individuals who make money on heinous crime are parasites. They are carelessly disrespectful to Daniel, the victim, the child. We find the making of the movie morally corrupt and cruel. So as you can see, there are many examples like this where someone profits or gain from someone else's misfortune, and people tend to find those tasteful. So what we were trying to do is to understand what drive those repugnance feelings. Now, I want to highlight that we're, of course, not the first ones to study repugnance. Al Roth, in his seminar paper, Repugnance as Constraints on Market, talk about the importance to understand repugnance feelings and also the difficulty in predicting repugnance. Now, in this line of literature, very often the researcher look at those activities where sacred values are involved, such as organ donations. Al Roth argued that there are three concerns about the monetization of transactions of organ donations: objectification, coercive, or cause society to slide down to a slippery slope to genuinely repugnant transactions. Now, we want to highlight all this literature, as I mentioned, sacred values involved. It does not apply to all the examples that I mentioned earlier, such as for purchasing foreign clothes to market, right? There's no really sacred value involved there. So it cannot explain fully why people find repugnant, feel repugnant toward the transaction that I just mentioned to you. So what we try to do in this paper is to design an experiment paradigm to allow us to examine whether and why people are feel repugnant to harmless transactions that profit from others' misfortune. And we call it piggyback profiting. And we try to answer three main research questions. First, do people punish piggyback profiting activities? And we use punishment to measure their repugnance feeling. And if so, why? And in particular, we test the hypothesis of intention-based repugnance. Do intentions to make a profit, a piggyback profit matter? Now, we are also interested in whether piggyback profiting from good outcomes also being considered as repugnant, because most of those moral judgments tend to focus on something where something bad happened. And we want to see whether actually moral judgment or repugnant feeling can actually arise even when there's nothing bad happened and only good things happened. Can people still find some profiting activities being repugnant in this situation? Okay, so just very quickly, some related literature, as I already mentioned, there some studies looked at repugnant transactions, and most often, as far as we know, in all those studies, often there's some sacred value involved, such as sale of human organs, prostitutions, surrogate motherhood. And also in those transactions, very often they have some tangible impact on someone's welfare, and where very often harm being involved. And in our experiment, we'll also explore the cases where there's just no tangible impact, and also even just there's no harm at all. Economists also looked at fairness, blameworthy, and try to understand how people perceive fairness, how people define kindness or unkindness. Now, again, in this literature, very often there's a causality. Basically, one's action is the reason, or at least partial reason, for another people's outcome. And in our experiment, we're going to remove the possibility of any causality here. Now, lastly, there are some social, probably mostly related to the context that we are interested in, coming from social psychology literature on moral judgment. And here, the psychologists use a vignette-based experiment and looking and show that moral judgment does not necessarily require causality or intentions that lead to the harm. There are two theories being proposed to explain this phenomena. One is that people judge act on the basis of how actions shape an individual's desire. So, for example, when someone can gain financially from a harmful event, they may therefore have a weak desire for this harm to occur, and people may find this weak desire being distasteful. Another theory is this basically argue that the certain action can imply about actors' moral character. So even though this action do not cause any harm right now, it may imply the actors being bad guy or some bad moral character, and as a result, people still find those actions being distasteful. As you can see, both these two theories require intention, right? Or at least people are aware of these profit activities. Otherwise, they won't have any weak desire, or if there's no intention, you cannot really infer any actor's moral character. So we're going to test what this intention-based hypothesis, as I will show you that, in fact, our results suggest these two theories cannot fully explain this repugnant feeling, because even absent of intentions, people still find those profit activities being distasteful. Okay, so I'm going to show you 3 studies. The first study, we start from looking at the second part is basically the victims' reaction towards this piggyback profiting from their monetary losses. We're also going to look at the reaction towards this profit activity from others' monetary wins. Then we're going to, after we look at the second parties, we move on to the third party's reaction, because that's how most of those repugnant literature looked at. They very often look at observers or third parties' reaction. The first 2 studies only involve monetary losses or wins. You may argue, this is not really moral. So in the third study, we're going to test the robustness of our findings in a context where there's more morally charged, where we're going to look at the reaction towards piggyback profiting from loss of lives. Okay, so in our first study, here's the experiment. Our main treatment is we call it bet treatment. 2 people play the game. One is in the role of player A, and the other one is in the role of player B. They both start with 10 pounds. We did this in prolific, so it's in pounds, in 10 pounds endowment, and they play 2 tasks. In the task 1, player B will play a rock, paper, scissors game. With a computer, if they win, they earn 12 pounds. If they lose the game, they will lose their 10 pounds endowment. Before player B play the game, player A can decide whether to bet on player B's outcome. They have 3 choices: either no bet, they do not bet, which means their earning not gonna to change, or they can bet. When they bet, they can either bet B will lose the game or win the game. So if they bet B will lose the game, they will win if B actually lost the game. We vary the potential profit they might earn from the betting. From highest profit is $12, 12 pounds, to 8 or 4, or they can bet but do not win anything. In this case, if B wins the game, of course, they basically lost the bet and they do not earn any profit. They can also bet B win. If they bet B win, then if B wins, they will profit. Again, either high profit 12 or 8 or 4 or 0. Okay, so that's task 1. In task 2, B can decide whether to pay 1 pound to reduce A's payoff if A plays a bet in task 1. Okay, so we use this as to measure to what extent B find A's betting behavior being distasteful. Okay. By the way, I think I don't know what's the norm here, but if you have any questions about the experiment design, please feel free to ask.
No questions so far, but maybe Erte, maybe on that point, then can you just quickly clarify? So presumably this was strategy methods, right? That you used. Mm-hmm. Now, how much information does A have about what B will be doing? How much, what is the joint information set here?
Yeah, so all these are common knowledge, and we tell them what these 2 tasks are about at the beginning of the experiment. So all the they read all this basically information before they start task 1.
Great. Yeah, we don't have any other questions so far.
Okay, good.
Oh, wait, there's one. Does A know that B can punish them? Which is probably related to my question. Yeah. Does A know? Yeah. Yeah,
this is all common knowledge. So yeah, as you probably anticipate, A's behavior is. I'm not going to talk about A's behavior because in the interest of time, I'm mostly going to focus on B, but you can imagine, I can briefly mention that A mostly they do bet, when they bet B win. So it also looks like they anticipate potential punishment when they bet on B losing. Yeah. Okay, so the just give you an idea how we listed the punishment decision as we can mention this is a strategy method. we just ask B how much they want to reduce A's payoff for each scenario. When A plays the bet, as you can see, for example, if A bet that I would lose the game, or if A bet I would win the game, and for each profit condition as well. Now, so that's the bet treatment. As I mentioned that we want to test the intention hypothesis. So we want to control intention, want to say, okay, if we test out the intention, what's going to happen? To do that, we introduce control treatment, where the purpose of the control treatment is to get rid of A's intention to bet completely. So in this case, we keep basically the structure in the incentive exactly the same, except that now, instead of having A bet what's going to happen for B in the rock, paper, scissors game, we just assign, the computer will assign A to one of the three portfolio, with each of them match the previous A's decision incentive, no bet on losing or bet on winning. So if A being assigned to portfolio 1, that means A's are, there's just nothing going to happen regardless of what happens to B in the rock, paper, scissors game. If A is assigned to portfolio 2, this is to match the case where A bet on B losing the game in the bet treatment. So in this case, if B lost the rock, paper, scissors game, A can potentially earn a positive profit. Similarly, for portfolio 3, this match the previous A bet on B winning the game in the bet treatment. So in this case, if B wins the game, A can have positive profits, 12, 8, 4, or 0.
And two quick questions, Erte, if you just don't mind. On that note, there was a quick follow-up in the chat by Juan, again, about the common knowledge. Not only was it common knowledge, but also the people knew that the other player also has common knowledge, right? So it was clear that you knew everybody's getting the same instructions, right? So that's, exactly. I'm assuming Juan is asking about fairness concerns and all of that, right? So I'll
get to the equality. Yeah, so that's the so you may argue there's some inequality. I'll get to that point later. Yeah.
Great. And then Christina has a question.
Yeah, my question is that you have abolished intentionality here.
Yes.
So is this complete common knowledge that there is no intentionality? So the guy has a portfolio and you have to judge what happens, basically the punishment for a portfolio that was not chosen, correct?
So the portfolio is assigned by the computer. So there's no in this.
Exactly. There is no intentionality, basically. Yes. That's what you have eliminated here. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And we also ensure that A never knows which portfolio they are assigned to. That means they could even form this, I mentioned this previous weak desire account, right? If A knows, oh, I could earn profit. If B lose, they may still form some weak desire, hoping that B would lose the game. But in this case, we ensure that A would never even know which portfolio they're assigned to. And again, this is common knowledge.
Exactly. Okay.
So then task 2, exactly the same as the bet treatment, B decide whether to punish A if they were assigned to portfolio 2 or 3. Here is just a screenshot for the control treatment where we, instead of betting scenario, now it's just a scenario of which portfolio they were assigned to, and everything is exactly the same as the bet treatment. Okay, so now let me just quickly explain how we test the hypothesis, which is actually not complicated at all. So we assume that our hypothesis is basically there's a repugnance about A making a piggyback profit, let's term it as pi here, from B's outcome. We tested 2 hypotheses. One is that this repugnance is intention-based, which is based on the previous social psychology literature, weak desire account or moral character. As I mentioned, both of these accounts require intention-based repugnance. Or another possibility, which has not been tested before, is this potential, this repugnance can be purely outcome-based. So maybe people just don't like the fact that one received profit based on their luck. And this could have this example of this could be like a pension investment, right? The investors, the pension fund investors, actually, they do not know their managers is investing in this activity, so they have no intention in engaging in these activities. Do people still find this being repugnant? As you already seen that in the bad treatment, we have both intention-based repugnance and outcome-based repugnance, but in the control, we only have outcome-based repugnance. So by comparing the punishment in the bad and in the control, we can learn the role of intention. Also quickly, just to show you why we design all those profits conditions to test our hypothesis, let me just give you this conceptual framework. We can think about punishment. F here consists of two components. One is repugnance towards piggyback profiting activities from B's outcome, called H here. H is a function of pi, the profit, and S is whether A bets on B's outcome or not. Now, there also could be another component, we call it epsilon. Epsilon refers to other reasons that could drive punishment, such as experiment demand effect, right? You may say, oh, we asked them to punish. Of course, they may just punish. Or some people might just find is a pleasant to punish, so joy of punishment or antisocial punishment. So this is all in epsilon. Now, epsilon should not vary across different profit conditions. So, which in contrast, the repugnance toward piggyback profiting should vary across different profit activities. So that's how we separate these two components. Okay, so if in the bad treatment, if A bets that B will have that outcome, when there's positive profit, we have piggyback profiting driven punishment, and of course the epsilon here. But when there's no profit, then we should only have the epsilon. So by taking the difference between the punishment imposed on the positive profit condition and punishment imposed on the zero profit condition, we will get this H, this repugnance-driven punishment, the piggyback profit-driven punishment. And depending on whether they bet on the bad outcome or good outcome, we can actually test both when the piggyback profiting punishment, the punishment imposed on piggyback profiting from bad outcome, or punishment imposed on piggyback profiting from good outcome. Again, basically, we're just going to look at the punishment difference between the positive profit condition and the zero profit condition. I think there's a question in the chat. I'm not sure if cannot see.
No questions. You're good.
Okay. Now in the control treatment, right? All the previous one, as I said, yeah, the piggyback profiting include both outcome based and intention based. Now we're gonna just do the same thing by looking at calculating the difference between punishment on the positive profit condition and on the negative on the zero profit condition, and we do the same thing in the control treatment and to get the outcome based piggyback profiting punishment. Here to differentiate from the previous one, we're just going to use H prime to denote the outcome-based punishment alone. Okay, so taking all this, okay, so let me just mention that in the previous conceptual framework, we assume that the payoff difference between A and B play a very minor role in the decision. Some of you already raised the question, right? A and B, they earn different profit, and we all know that inequality can lead to punishment. Now we're going to make two notes here. First, if inequality matters, it should not affect the test of intention-based hypothesis, because it's the same between that and the control treatment. So when we look at the difference between bad and the control, the difference should not correlate with any inequality between A and B. Second, as I mentioned earlier, we also look at another context where instead of betting on someone's monetary losses, in the study 3, we allow people to bet on life losses. So presumably, it's unlikely to argue that by punishing people $10 or $1, you're going to reduce the inequality between life losses and monetary gain. So we think that our results are unlikely to be driven by inequality erosion. And this might be more clear when I get to the study 3. Okay, so the first hypothesis we're going to test is punishment is imposed on piggyback profiting from others' bad outcome. And for the results that I'm going to show you, I will it's always going to be the difference. We for each participants, each punisher, we calculate the punishment amount they imposed on the positive profit condition and the zero profit condition. If it's greater than 0, then we say they impose a piggyback profit driven punishment. Okay, so all the data I'm going to show you next is always the difference that we calculated. Then we're going to test whether this punishment, if any, is intention-based by comparing this difference in the bad treatment and this difference in the control treatment. If the difference is, so basically we do the difference in difference test. If the difference is greater in the bad treatment than the control treatment, then we say punishment is driven by intention or intention plays a role. On the other hand, if we find the punishment being similar, the pattern being similar in the bad treatment as compared to the control treatment, then we say the intention plays a little role, and punishment is purely outcome based. And we do the same thing for the case when A bet, B will win again. So when A bet, B will have some good outcome. Okay, so I will not go through this. Everything is symmetry as the previous slide. Okay, so how am I doing on time? I have 15 minutes, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let me first show you the punishment results. As I mentioned, we're always looking at we define piggyback profit-driven punishment equals to 1 if the B punish more in the positive profit condition as compared to zero profit condition. So here we have 4 conditions. One is when A bet, B has bad outcome, meaning B will lose the rock, paper, scissors game, or A bet B will have good outcome, meaning B will win the rock, paper, scissors game. And then we have the counterpart to control condition where A is just being assigned to one of the 2 portfolios. I will also see the punishment when the profit from betting is 4 or 8 or 12 pounds. And this is just the punishment frequency. So overall, we have about between 20% and 30% people punish. When A bet, B will lose the game. And not surprisingly, probably, the punishment frequency is higher as the profit goes up. Now, interestingly, even when A bet B will win the game, we still observe a significant amount of punishment, which is kind of suggesting what we found in the previous studies where, we tend to focus on when something bad happened, right, this misfortune. But when we look at if some people bet on somebody has good outcome, we actually still absorb punishment. So punishment, this repugnance is not unique to profiting from misfortune. It could actually happen when someone profits from somebody's good fortune. Moreover, this punishment pattern also observed in control. So even we remove the intention to profit, we still observe about 20% people punish. And not only when they profit from that outcome, somebody else bad outcome, but also when they profit from someone else good outcome.
We have a question in the chat, Erte, whether some of these results could be explained by B just being against gambling and not so much, in the context of these decisions, but just generally against gambling. Is that an explanation?
From gambling, the gambling one, what about in the control one, it's not gambling, right? They're kind of just assigned. So I would argue that's not gamble. Right? If it's just about gamble, then we would say in the control it should not be there.
They could potentially leave if they don't want to, participate in this type of everything is common knowledge. So it's clearly understood that there will be a gamble involved. If you're there and you might be assigned to this portfolio or that. So, I may dislike it and I'm just going, I'll punish you for that because you shouldn't earn money like this or something of the sort.
Yeah, but I would argue that's just a part of the story, right? You shouldn't get money like. Are you saying that this is just purely about gambling, nothing?
I'm just saying that this is about a bit confounded, the fact that I might not like gambling, and this might, raise perhaps everything up or down in terms of the results, which we see that there is, and I cannot disentangle it from this, getting back at you because you played and gambled specifically about the fact that I'm going to play rock, paper, scissors. So, I mean, there.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting that in our case, B himself is engaging in gambling, right? So it's like you are like gambling on gambling. So I think for that reason, because B's payoff also come from gambling, basically, right? I would
just
say,
raising the point. That's interesting. Yeah, please go ahead.
So I think it's unlikely B punish A because A gamble when B himself actually profit from gambling.
Okay.
You agree? Yeah. Right. So then maybe in the life betting on life, yeah, that's actually means this treat. I would say like the study 3, then there's no gambling because the life losses, but here they basically all engage in gambling activities. Okay, so next we're going to test our main hypothesis, which is the intention based, actually probably anticipated here based on the graph, although we have some weak evidence of intention, but as I will show you, it's very weak. So what I'm going to do next is to compare the bet and the control, and for the interest of time, I'm going to only focus on the 12-pound profit condition. And so basically, I'm going to zoom out this dark gray bar between bet and control and only focus on the 12 pounds. All the results are robust when we look at the other 2 profit conditions. So if we compare bet and control, we do find some evidence suggesting intention matters, but overall is weak. To say this, in terms of the punishment frequency, we do observe that punishment is more likely to occur in the bet condition. So when A intentionally bet on B's outcome as compared to in the control treatment when A is just randomly assigned to one of those outcomes. But if you look at the average punishment amount of all those punishers, there's no significant difference. In fact, control is even slightly higher in terms of punishment amount. And this is the picture of the case when A bet B will lose the game. Now, what about when A bet B will win the game? We do not observe any significant difference between bet and control in terms of the punishment frequency. Also, the amount of punishment is not higher in the bet than the control. In fact, the direction is even opposite. So intention does not contribute to the punishment when A bet B will win the game.
Can you clarify how to make sense of this opposing significant result on the right?
Oh, this, yeah, we don't really, this is always something puzzling. And we, as you will see, we keep on observing this, especially in the good. So the only explanation we might have is maybe, there's some intention of betting on good outcome and people honor that. When you bet the other person can win, maybe, people appreciate that intention, and in terms of the amount, they punish less. So that's the only, but that is not robust across the different conditions. So we don't want to highlight this result. Sometimes it's significant, sometimes it's not. Yeah, so I don't want to make a big deal of that. Okay, so quick summary of the study one, we find people do punish piggyback profiting activities, and punishment is more likely when there's intention to make a piggyback profit from others' bad outcome. But as I mentioned, we do not observe this intention story when it comes to the good outcome case. So punishment, interestingly, observed even when there's no intention to make profit, and also when the profit is attached to the positive outcome of others. Now, let me show you another. So we conduct two other studies to test the robustness of the results. The study two basically is motivated by the fact that most literature, when they talk about repugnance, they look at the third party rather than the second party, as what we did in the study one. And in the third study, we look at a more morally charged context. Okay, given the time, let me just very quickly show you, because I think the third study might be more interesting in terms of the design. I just want to mention that this was when we introduced a third party. So instead of asking B to punish, now we introduce an observer where call player C. Player C earn a fixed amount in both tasks, and they always earn more than the players, so that we can remove the consideration of inequality. So C should not punish A because of they earn less than A. And again, just like the previous study, C can pay £1 to reduce A's payoff, and everything else remains the same as the previous design. We have both bad treatment and control treatment. So let me quickly show you the result. The pattern is very similar. Basically, we observe punishment across all the 4 conditions. And here, the outcome-based story is even more strong. As you can see, the bad and control, there's pretty much no difference. And also, the punishment occurs even when the profit comes from good outcome. This is just a zoom out picture of profit 12 case. There's no significant difference between bad and control, and not even for the punishment amount. Both for the case when A bet on B's bad outcome and when A bet on B's good outcome. Okay, so that's almost identical in this case. Okay, so let me move on to the third study, the moral context study. So here we, instead of the betting on, B losing income monetary losses in the very artificial game. So now we say, okay, maybe this, the intention story, which seems to be the whole theory behind this moral judgment in the previous literature, maybe this is because lack of morality context, right? And then the intention, that even bad intention is not so bad. And maybe that's the reason we do not find intention-based repugnance. So to test if that's the case, now we try to increase the moral meaning in our context. Now, in this third study, we ask A, so we no longer have B playing this rock, paper, scissors game. Now instead, we ask A to place a bet about number of road deaths in South Carolina on a pre-specified day. Why South Carolina? Because that's the only place we find online. They give you daily updates of road death. So in here we ask A, either they bet or not bet. When they bet, they can bet either, so just bet on 2 outcomes, either positive number of deaths, so somebody died, or nobody died, 0 deaths. Profit condition is exact the same as the previous 2 studies. So the punishment also designed the same way as the previous 2 studies. So C can pay £1 to reduce A's payoff up to £10 if A plays a bet. Again, in the control treatment, we remove intention to bet on death and just assign A to one of the 3 portfolios, which match the previous bet treatments. Okay, so here is the results. again, they're similar to the previous two studies. C, punish, basically across all the four conditions. Not only they punish when A bad, somebody will die, they actually also punish when A bad, no one will die. And control treatment, exactly the same. They punish in both cases, and most importantly, they do punish even though there's no intention to bet on death or bet on no death at all. In fact, we actually observe some even slightly high frequency of punishment in the control treatment. So again, if I zoom out, I missed the something.
But I have a question. If we go back one slide, or two slides, no, this one. You see A's additional earning, not the next one, I think.
The one before.
The one before, yeah. Bet on a positive number of deaths, and 10 if no death. Why did you add the 10 if no death, and in the bet of 0 death, 10 if some death? So I'm confused about that.
Sorry, I think, sorry, this should be 0 because 10, I forgot this, I should update this. This is 10 from the endowment, so this should be 0, if that's what I showed in the previous two study. Yeah,
okay.
So they don't earn anything and they just earn this 10 endowment. Yeah, sorry about the confusion.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so if we zoom out, this is the 12 pounds case. Again, we don't say people are more likely to punish in the bad as compared to control. In fact, it's the opposite direction. In terms of punishment amount, no significant difference. Even when it comes to a bad, nobody will die, good outcome. We do not see more punishment happen in the bad treatment than the control. Positive results, maybe just good intention matters, as I mentioned. In fact, people are more likely to punish in the control as compared to the bad. Punishment amount, no difference. Okay, so that's I think pretty much the summarize of the results that I showed to you. We find that people are willing to incur costs to punish piggyback profiting activities. Intention play a very limited role in explaining the punishment, which actually, called the question about this theory that I mentioned to you, this weak desire, account, or moral character, does not seem to be able to explain, or at least not fully explain, this repugnance feeling, why people find this kind of transaction being repugnant, because there's no weak desire, or they cannot infer any moral characters in our context in this control treatment. Also, what I found also quite interesting from this study is that, which is absent in the previous moral judgment literature, because we look at the case where people profit from good outcome, right? As I mentioned in the previous moral judgment literature, very often we tend to focus on something bad happen. But in our case, even when something good happen, people find profiting from good outcome being repugnant. So in the future, and I would also want to get your thoughts about what should be the next most important step to follow up. We've thought about something about what to mitigate the repugnance build on this paradigm. We can probably look at if we want to promote. If we think a market helps, such as the prediction market on terrorists, right, or life settlement, in some sense, it can help people who are terminally ill because they got money right away rather than getting the money after their death is not meaningful. We can think about what can we do to mitigate those repugnance. For example, we can look at profit sharing. If you share the profit with the terminally ill people before they die, maybe that can help to remove the repugnance, which is also actually in practice, that's something what they do. Does donation, if we donate all the money to the charity, does that help to reduce the repugnance? Or if we share the information about the benefit of, for example, prediction market on tourists, does that help to reduce the repugnance? Yeah, so I will stop here and looking forward to your comments or suggestions. Thank you.
Great, Erte, thanks. We have 2 questions in the comments. Who wants to you? I don't know if the questions have been answered maybe already. If not, just raise your hand and then you can just ask the question directly to Erte. I see Christina has her actual hand up, so let's start with Christina.
Yeah, thank you. A very brief question. You know that in moral psychology, you know, repugnance, disgust, think of Jonathan Haidt, are considered primitive. So for example, if you give people an example of incest, even willing, a brother and sister who love each other, let's say, you know, people may claim that they feel repugnance, etc. And so what the psychologists claim is that the emotion comes first and the moral judgment is just secondary to the emotion. Now, in your case, if this is the case, you cannot mitigate repugnance. Okay, because it's a very primitive emotions. You feel repugnance and the moral judgment follows that. So here you seem instead to think of repugnance or disgust as following a moral judgment, i.e. people think it is wrong to profit from the disgrace of other people or whatever. And then, of course, you can mitigate it if people donate some of the money, etc., etc. So I would be careful in using repugnance or disgust, exactly because there is a whole theory according to which disgust is totally primitive, okay, and you cannot mitigate it. End of story. And the moral judgment follows the motion. While in your case, you seem to think that there is a certain moral judgment and the moral judgment can, you know, be mitigated and blah, blah, blah. So I would be more careful with your definition of repugnance and how to mitigate it. Okay.
So are you saying by defining the repugnance, they're already indicating that it cannot mitigate it? The feeling is just something that embedded in, yeah.
If you buy the theory,
yeah, okay.
It's Jonathan Haidt theory is very well known about morality. And the idea is at the basis of morality are certain basic emotions. So the conceptual the concept of morality and what's moral or immoral follows the emotion. So we naturally, according to him and other people, we naturally feel repugnance for certain behaviors, whatever. Okay, and because of that, we construct this behavior as immoral. Okay. So in your case, you are using instead repugnance as just, you know, we think is an immoral act.
I see. Okay.
Because the interesting thing in your case is if I think is an immoral action, of course, you know, I want to punish the intention, okay, to harm. The interesting thing is if there is no intention to harm, okay, but, you know, harm occurs, why do I want to punish?
Right.
Do you have an explanation for that? Because still there is a willingness to punish, even if there is no intention to harm.
Yeah, so I mean, that's, we don't really, I mean, I have only some hypotheses which need to be tested. One is probably, and this is also just collecting some feedback from the previous presentation, one possibility might be this, people feel is exploiting others. I still don't feel, you know, that's exploration, but maybe people view differently. So one interesting treatment that we might try to test next is if we remove human agency in the first task, for example, let's say in the first study, if instead of having B playing the rock, paper, scissors game, we just have computer play the game, and then A can bet on computer. So basically, whether this is attached to human being involved. So some people may argue this is like a parasite kind of what I mentioned, right? This just, you don't like this idea of being a parasite for good or bad. Your profit is attached to another human being, and people just find that being repugnant. Still, of course, it still does not explain why, but let's see whether this is particular about unique associated with a human outcome or not. That could be one first step to test, which
That's a good
may
idea.
speak for whether that's exploiting other people. I still don't see why we would think that as exploiting, because the other person is not affected by you at all. Why is that exploiting other people's outcome? It might be more like in the movie context, movie industry, that example is probably, you can view that as exploiting other people's tragedy and your own profit. But I don't personally think, I won't view that as exploiting, but we can test whether this is unique to human outcome or not, and see if it's just a parasite. Or so another theory could be just in our case, you make profit for nothing, you don't really produce anything, you don't gain any social benefit, right? You don't create anything for the society, you don't do any good, it's purely just playing with the money. Maybe people dislike that. That could be another possibility. They don't like this kind of what should be the name of that, just making money for no good. Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense. So that could be another possibility. It's sort of like probably the gambling idea. Although I have to think about whether this is, I don't think it is just about distaste to the gambling idea, but maybe that's a kind of, or both of them is kind of speak for why some people find that gambling is, they don't like gambling because that's not create any social benefit. So, but if you have any interesting hypothesis why this is something that we still don't know fully very well, we just test the hypothesis, but we don't really have a theory to say this is the reason. We can only reject the previous theory, say this is not enough to explain.
Well,
sorry,
let me finish. Maybe doing an experiment with a computer would help clarify these things, because a computer loses or wins, but is a computer. I mean, it's not a being. And another interesting thing, I think there would be a great difference if the victim can be identified, like is player B, or the victim is a group or society. I think this would make an enormous difference. We are much more lenient. Think of option trading. In option trading, you may gain a lot on the losses of lots of other people, right? Market losses of other people if you bet well. And nobody would think this is a bad idea. But buying foreclosed homes, you can sort of identify the person, who lost the home. So there is a big difference, I think, in this respect. I would explore that. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks.
So we have 2 hands up, but real quick, I don't know how far you are in the write-up of your paper, but so there are 2 streams of literature that you may consider. I mean, one is there's this flourishing literature on decision-making for others that has been sort of developed in the past sort of 10 or so years. Sasha Filbrun has like a special issue in the Journal of Economic Psychology, and all those papers are about decisions for others, and they vary intentions and randomness, like all of these little things that you also do. And I think that's a good literature to connect yourself to, right? And so they check how third parties respond, how the other party respond. There's a lot of that, and it shares similarities with your setup. And then the other one is sort of, I mean, Falk-Fischbacher, like the 2008 Games Economic Behavior paper, and then the others on intention and fairness, right? So there's a lot of that will be relevant to you. So I think in your write-up, you want to connect to those sort of economic
this is a recent, you mentioned the Journal of Economic Psychology. This is a recent special issue, or?
Yeah, I think it was before the pandemic, so it's maybe like 2019 or something. But yeah, it's if you look for decision making for others or decisions for others, there's like a lot of that, and so Sasha is like part of that group that has just been publishing a lot on these things.
Okay, thanks.
Great. So Amnon and then Gianluca.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. I was wondering about the how this is in some sense connected to insurance contracts. So we tend to think that, I mean, people tend to want to punish or exploit insurance companies, although they are aligned in the sense that they, you know, they earn more when we do well and don't have a car accident, and they have to pay when we do. So I was wondering if you have any thoughts about that. Of course, it's a much more complicated, you know, true situation, but seems to have some to do with the punishment in the good, even in the good intention state. In your
so that's probably also related to the life settlement the case. In the insurance case, so this is interesting. I think someone else also mentioned the insurance. I need to think more about it. But in the insurance case, I think you benefit in some sense. You do have the feature where someone can benefit. Let me think. Someone can benefit from people's. Not really. The insurance company, of course, not benefits from. They only benefit if nothing bad happened to you. So it's actually the good side. But on the other hand, the insurance company actually help you to, in case that something bad happened, there's some bad instance, right? So they're more complicated. The context is more complicated than what we talk about here. I think the fact that insurance can help some people can probably, plays a major role that usually people don't find those as repugnant. Also relatedly, this whole research actually driven by my reading of Michael Sandel's book of What Money Cannot Buy, where he mentioned several other examples. And he also asked, which I found quite interesting, this funeral. Right, funeral, you actually also obviously benefit from a death, and yet we seldom think about funeral accompaniments or those businesses as being repugnant. And he mentioned that in those cases, actually, the business owner also help the victim's family. And I was just on the listening to the radio when I was driving, and then I heard this commercial about some funeral business. At the end of the commercial, they highlight that we are nonprofit organizations, which I thought kind of speak very nicely to what we are doing here. Maybe it is the profit actually really make it repugnant, and I can imagine that people probably find this commercial about funeral business being repugnant. But if you say we are nonprofit organizations, maybe that helped to remove these repugnant feelings. Yeah. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Yes, I also put in the chat another strand of literature that might be helpful in interpreting the results. So that has more to do with procedural fairness. And in this seminal paper by Brands, Bolton, and Dockenfels, you also find that people punish unfair outcomes, or better, unequal outcomes, even when these were the results of a lottery. And I mean, when I read that paper, I thought that it was as if the punishers wanted to punish maybe the experimenter. So they punished the principle of the interaction, but actually what they wanted to punish was the experimenter. But that's a by-side. So I think with hindsight, if I were you, I would have allowed the punishment even when A did not bet. So you could have an assessment of the baseline propensity to experience the joy of punishment, so to punish regardless. And on that note, I also was wondering whether your treatment, your design was between subject or within subject, because if it is within subject, then it could be that people mixed up the intention and the non-intention conditions. And also, I wasn't clear on what was the ratio between the punishment, the punishment cost to B, and how much A received as punishment, because that could also matter.
Okay. Thanks. So it is within. It is between subject design. So participants only participate in either bad or control treatment. The punishment, I think, I recognize. I realized I went through it very quickly. So it's you can punish, you pay the cost of £1 and you can punish up to £10. And we did it intentionally because first we want to introduce some costs, so that is not cheap talk, right? And those social psychology literature, very often they use VNet, so there's no real estate. So we do introduce cost for the punishment, but we also don't want the cost being too large, because then even if people feel repugnant, they may not punish simply because they don't want to pay the cost. So we just use the fixed cost of £1 and you can punish up to £10. So we can still look at the degree of repugnance, but it's not cheap talk. So that's the ratio. I will look up the procedural fairness literature. Thanks. And in terms of the inequality, as I mentioned, I do not think that helped that well explain our punishment decisions, for the reason, especially for the study 3. It's unlikely that someone, if they punish using punishment to reduce the inequality, they should punish all the way up to £10, which is not what we observed. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. So I think that's a good time to wrap up. Erte, thanks so much. This was fantastic. Everybody who wants to stick around can still stick around. Cornelia,